Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Future Construct podcast. I am your host, Amy Peck, and we have a fantastic guest with us today. We have Todd Mustard, who is the Vice President of TAUC, which is the Association of Union Constructors. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, Amy, thanks for having me.
So we have a lot of ground to cover today. But I'd like to start by just asking you, how did you get into this business and, kind of land in your career where you are today?
Sure. It was very serendipitous. I had my first job out of college. I worked for America Online, AOL, and I moved from Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, to Arlington, Virginia. Well, technically Reston, Virginia. And I worked for AOL for a couple of years. It was right after the AOL Time Warner merger, and had survived multiple rounds of layoffs. And then I made the mistake of getting promoted, moved to a new department, and then another layoff hit. And it was one of these first in, first out situations. So I found myself like being very angry at corporate America. And so I wanted to find something else and different. So I actually did the temp agency thing for a little bit and landed at this association. They quickly realized that I had a decent work ethic and that I could put a couple words together writing wise, and they hired me as their communications person. And so this was in summer of 2002. I got fully hired on January 1, 2003. And for whatever reason, I've been there ever since. So 18 years later, which is a lifetime, it seems like. But the role and responsibilities have changed pretty dramatically over those 18 years. I've held 4 or 5 different positions. And now I've finally kind of settled in where my kind of main buckets, although with an association, you wear a lot of hats. But my primary focus is on innovation and technology and government affairs, although I still have my hands in a lot of other different pots as well.
That is a very long temp gig.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very long temporary employment. Yeah.
And then so, moving from communications, it seems like now you really have your finger on the pulse of innovation as well, and are really looking at addressing some of the challenges that are kind of coming through in the industry, and then how technology can solve. I'd love to hear, some of the initiatives that you're working on directly or indirectly, and what you're seeing out there in terms of, a great use of technology in this realm.
Sure. And it might be just a little helpful to give the listeners a little bit of background on who the Association of Union Constructors is. We're based in Arlington, Virginia. We have 1,800 plus contractors that are members of ours. But what's unique about us is that they all employ union labor, and therefore we have like incredible relationships with 14 different international unions. So I say that just as a background. So when we do anything, we try to do things in what we call a tripartite way, meaning it's not only the contractors that are participants, but also the owner clients and the trades. And we feel like if those 3 are all at the table, then we're working in this collaborative way that will benefit the industry. And so back in 2017, we started kind of positioning ourselves where we realized and knew that innovation tech was going to be a much bigger thing for our industry than probably what we were willing to maybe admit at the time. And I have a sort of I naturally enjoy and like technology. So I kind of gravitated towards that. In 2017, we decided to hold our first industrial grade innovation conference and expo. Technically, it was in 2018. And we did it in Dearborn, Michigan. We invited the contractors, the owner clients, and the trades all to participate. And we tied it in with the fact that Henry Ford's museum is across the street. And obviously, he had a huge impact on technology, as we all know. And since then, that kind of spearheaded this initiative to where we created our first Innovation Technology Committee in 19. And the committee now has been active for the last 2 years in some trying times, but we have a lot of large GCs, but also small subcontractors that are all participating in the association. They all come with different perspectives. And in terms of like what we're working on as a committee, a couple of the bigger things right now, one of the cool things we did actually back in 2019 was we went to Microsoft and we went and checked out the HoloLens R&D facility. And we're blown away with the fact that they, at the time, had spent, I think, $300 billion on virtual reality and augmented reality with their HoloLens. Literally, I think the churn was $50 billion a year over 6 years, which was amazing and blew our minds. But that gave us sort of an insight and perspective into what was like the art of the possible. Oh. And so now we are also kind of leveraging relationships using the association to basically actually go back to the large corporations like AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile and others to try to help connect the job site. So job site connectivity is one of our kind of big initiatives that we're working on right now. And there's, ultimately, we know there's an amazing amount of technology out there that could be used on construction sites, but unfortunately can't until we have broadband capacity, right? And so the committee right now is in the process of working up a number of different case studies, from small, week-long projects to billion-dollar, multi-year, projects that would require a whole host of different, activities and needs and desires. But so that's one of the things we're working on. The second is it's a play off of the fact that we had in our last IGI, we had this new company called Equipment Share there. And one of the things they're working on, it's sort of, the way I would describe it is sort of like a Toro. Have you heard of Toro?
Yeah.
Where you can rent somebody else's car when you land at the airport, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is like a Toro for construction heavy equipment. And so the idea here is you put sensors on a whole bunch of stuff, and if that scissor lift is inactive and hasn't moved in a while, they say, hey, you can basically offset your cost by allowing someone else to use it or repurpose it, right? And so because of that conversation, we're now looking at tool tracking and management systems, because we think there's a huge opportunity to create efficiencies for a number of our contractors through the use of that technology.
That's amazing. So you guys are really acting as kind of Switzerland, and I loved that idea that you kind of sit in the middle and you're making sure that you're servicing, all the stakeholders, because that's where the challenges come in, right? If we're just dealing with owners and they sort of insist to the contractors and even the subs on a particular technology, it's a lot harder to get them to evolve than when they're all at the table to begin with. So I think that's really exciting news. And, connectivity is a challenge, really on any job site, especially remote job sites. But you mentioned HoloLens. There's another great technology out there called Magic Leap. They're really the only two on the market that can kind of do the sort of true mixed reality. And so, we talked a little bit, before we started here today on really how do we kind of bridge the knowledge gap? And, you have been front and center, you've been experiencing, a few solutions to that. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that and where you see some of the innovations coming on that side.
Yeah, absolutely. Labor supply in general has been a huge concern of ours and the industries for, as long as I've been at the association, to be completely honest. And so identifying ways to not only recruit and retain people into the industry, that's a big deal, but also extend the lifespan and careers of individuals that are hitting an age where they may not think construction is no longer a career opportunity for them. So the HoloLens and the other, I'm sorry, what was the name of the one you mentioned?
Oh, Magic Leap. Yeah.
Magic Leap.
Yeah.
We actually also had a RealWear speak
that's a great device
ago, which I know they're no longer. Yep.
Yeah.
And so using that technology to allow individuals with incredible expertise to provide insight and input to maybe younger people or people that are less experienced seems like an unbelievable opportunity. But we've also had some pilot projects using technology called Deep How, which allows an individual to take a video of someone completing a project or task that is an expert at it, and as it records the information, it tags the language to allow someone else to come in later and do a search and identify all the videos that pertain to said search. And so they're using AI to figure out a way to make it easier for people to consume interesting things that they need to know and see prior to doing XYZ job, which I think is a great example of kind of, you're right, bridging that knowledge gap, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to take a little break here and hear from our sponsors, but we will be back momentarily with Todd Mustard. And we are back with Todd Mustard from TAUC. So, you were talking a little bit before the break about Deep How and some of the, recording and capture side. But, technology is going to be really, really important in kind of enticing the next generation workforce. In fact, it's going to be an imperative. If you don't have emerging tech, you're not going to be able to attract this next generation workforce. So how is the industry tackling that piece of it as well?
It's a great point. And we've often talked about how technology innovation can be used to change the perception of construction, because the general public have a lot of, I think, preconceived notions of what construction is or isn't. And I think innovation tech is definitely one way to highlight the fact that our industry is changing pretty dramatically. Obviously, drones come to mind, 3D printing, all this other really interesting, neat stuff. We have one example of what we've done is we actually had the volunteer president of the Girl Scouts of America speak at our last IGI event this past August in St. Louis. And she connected us with 3 or 4 different troops in the local area, and they all came and checked out the trade show. They got to play with, $100,000 Spot the Dog from Boston Dynamics, and do a number of other things that they were wowed and amazed by. But it was just having young people at an event like that too, just created such a really cool energy that I think other people, appreciate it as well. But I think the example there is, if we can show people like live and in the flesh, true examples of how we're changing and how we're adopting new technology to make ourselves more efficient, effective, safer, et cetera, it's going to change, how people see construction. Another example is my kids were in an aftercare school program, and I demonstrated a 3D printing competition that was run by NASA of a group that won the ability to create habitats on Mars. And I think, even though, that's a little conceptual, I think that's another, it definitely blew them away with sort of the art of the possible again, and shows just how dramatically, our industry is not, we always say what your father's or grandfather's, union was doing or construction was. So I don't know, those are just a couple examples.
No, and I love that. And I love the fact that, you're also focused on young girls, because, it's the diversity and inclusion piece, and it extends beyond just gender and race. It's really about, experience and culture. There's so much that goes into what is diversity. But we have to start somewhere, and, getting more women into this industry. And it's not just the AEC industry. I mean, all of the industries have this challenge. And so making it more accessible and welcoming, I think is, I applaud your efforts there as a woman in tech. But just, as a human in tech, right? We want to have the, kind of broadest swath of people to help us solve some of the challenges that are coming forward. I think that's really exciting. So I do know that you have to pick up your kids soon. So we'll tackle one more topic on kind of innovation. And what would you say to kind of, your, future kid, your kids in the future, 20 years from now, and this is going to lead us to our last question. What are some of the types of careers that they could look at? You mentioned 3D printing. There's a lot of sort of prefab going on. There's engineering. What are some of the cool jobs of the future that you see evolving now that actually our kids today can actually shape?
So my wife actually, she works for an NGO called the Ocean Conservancy. So they're very focused on sort of the environmental impacts and like cleaning, making sure the ocean is clear of plastics and stuff like that. And it's funny, construction, because a lot of our members work in sort of very heavy industrial, oil and gas, all this other stuff. But construction is also in many ways sort of the answer to help kind of address some of these climate concerns, whether it's doing carbon capture and sequestration, or the solar field work, or the hydro dams, et cetera. I think construction in this, I don't often hear this argument, but construction is actually a huge opportunity for us to address any climate concerns that people may have. And so I think one way to get kids excited about this, like future of how they could physically impact how we address climate, is actually through construction, which, for whatever reason, I don't think enough people are talking about. And I think the youth in general are pretty concerned about this, as are, many others. But I think there's just huge opportunities. We've got a couple of large projects that our contractors are going to be working on. GM and Ford are both doing these massive electro vehicle plants where they're creating the batteries, and they're building them in the United States, in Tennessee, in Ohio, and other places. And so these are just examples of like moving us to like a clean air, cleaner environment that I think will benefit all of us, in the United States and the world. And I think construction has a huge impact to that, which I'm personally very, very excited about.
I'm happy to hear that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that, that next generation workforce, in the way that, maybe as we grew up, just weren't thinking about it. It is top of mind and an absolute priority, certainly for millennials, Gen Z behind them, and Gen Alpha behind them. Like they want to, and they actually have to solve these problems. So I'm very happy to hear that it's top of mind for TAUC and for your work as well. So that brings us to our last question that I ask everyone, which is, if you could project yourself 20, 25 years into the future, you could bring with you any, product or service that would just make you personally happy or make your life better in some way. What would it be and what would it do?
All right, this is a tough one, and I of course did not do like a lot of research in preparation for this, but I went to the U.S. Chamber, and the Speakers Bureau in D.C. would often host these luncheons where they'd bring in expert speakers that would talk about a book. And one of the ones that I saw was it was called "The Next Big Thing is Going to Be Really, Really Small," and it was all about nanotechnology. And I think nanotech, they would talk about like this building an elevator to space, right? So that we wouldn't have to waste jet fuel or whatever. So I think nanotech would be the thing I would be most interested in seeing 25 years from now. Not only what it can do for us, from a building perspective, but also like from a healthcare, like just this, I'm imagining Dennis Quaid in that ridiculous movie back in the 80s where he becomes miniaturized and like goes inside somebody's body. But, you know, having like nanotech be able to basically find cancer cells and destroy them in people's bodies, I think is just would be unbelievably amazing. So
I love that. It's like a little video game inside you, like shooting at any of the cancer cells.
There you go.
I would have one that would like push the donut back out and going, no, you don't need that.
Yeah, stop. Just stop right there.
Stop right there. Well, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you, Todd. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about all your work. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Amy, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.